Story 1. I asked my girlfriend to marry me. I arranged a surprise trip to France and proposed on the Eiffel Tower. 2 weeks later, I was told I had cancer. Note, I am fine now. It was stage 4, but I beat it. Story 2. Mother, considered very healthy by medical professionals, died suddenly from an undiagnosed congenital heart disorder. Everyone was shocked that she died before my father, who is ill with multiple conditions and misuses prescription medications. Story 3. Went to school for journalism, mostly because it meant I would never have to take another math course again. I am an accountant now. Story 4. Moved to Los Angeles from the East Coast at 23 years old to pursue a musical career. Got too involved with sex, drugs, and rock and roll, went to prison. Now I am a welder. I guess I just like heavy metal. Story 5. Starting a business on a whim, and now it is on track for $8 million in gross revenue this year. Also adopting my niece and nephew. Story 6. I'm a middle-aged white suburban dad with a body to match and a bad haircut. I spent time in the military and was deployed to war zones several times, where I proudly served as a medic with the infantry. I used to be a sheriff's deputy when I left the military. Plot twist. I'm a far left-leaning liberal who grew up in the ghetto of one of the most segregated cities in America. I play Dungeons and Dragons, I watched Last Week Tonight, and my favorite band of all time is the Dead Kennedys. I was a police officer for less than 4 months because I thought being one would give me a chance to get back in uniform and figured it would be like the army. It was the complete opposite, and I hated it. Now I work in a museum as a human resources representative. Story 7. I was deeply involved in a religious movement that was very cult-like. I took on leadership roles, and people expected me to be a great leader or prophet. They were waiting for me to start my own church. Then I left all of that suddenly on a random Thursday. Story 8. I was a shy, introverted kid who never went out much as a teenager and preferred to stay indoors playing World of Warcraft. I am now a shy, introverted man in my 30s who still plays World of Warcraft, but has also visited 6 continents and around 20 countries. I am a teacher and have enjoyed my summer by temporarily leaving the United States, riding camels in the desert of Morocco, and sipping port wine in Porto. The Secret Life of Walter Mitty was a big inspiration for me. Story 9. My parents had a son 2 years before I was born. He died in the 9th month of the pregnancy. No one knows why, but I found out last November. All that time, I thought I was like their first child. Turns out I only exist because my brother did not survive. Story 10. I grew up in a religious household idolized by my conservative father. I am queer, atheist, and socialist-leaning, and I like being black. To clarify the last part, I do not think my dad dislikes being black, but he did not treat it as something to appreciate either. It affected the way I viewed myself and other black people for a while. Story 11. My mother was diagnosed with cancer and had an unethical oncologist who lied, misdiagnosed patients, and committed Medicare fraud. My mother passed away at the age of 46. I was 20 years old. Story 12. Started the day completely normally. By evening, I was told about my child's diagnosis of leukemia. I literally did not suspect anything before then. The same child started the day completely normally. By that night, they had become a premature baby. Story 13. The guy who rejected me in high school is now my loving boyfriend almost 6 years later. Funny how things turn out. Story 14. You can have everything you ever wanted, but you will not enjoy any of it because you have been beaten down for 45 years and are too jaded to feel happiness. Story 15. When I was younger, I had issues that nobody could figure out. Nothing could explain the way I was. I found out in my 30s that I am autistic. I learned about autism and how it affects autistic people. Suddenly, my whole life made sense. Story 16. Was out of state visiting family and decided to pass the time on a dating app. Matched with a girl. For years later, we lived together 1,000 miles away from both of our old homes. I am proposing this month. Story 17. I got married and was with my partner for 12 years in total when I met someone who completely changed my life. I divorced at 33 and now have a baby coming in 2 months. It has been a strange ride and everything changed for me, but this feels like who I was meant to be with. Story 18. The closest I came was preparing to join the army, achieving first place in the academy exam, being dismissed for not being 18, suddenly being accepted into university and attending. I was not expecting that. Story 19. I easily floated through life, being one of the lucky ones who were good at school, topping the class without trying very hard. Plot twist. I applied for dentistry in October and was rejected from all my choices, 3 of them on the same day. Now I have to either go to university for my second option course and continue floating while barely living, or I can finally start trying and put in the work to become a dentist. I am going to have to stop being lazy, I guess. Story 20. I may have finally solved my back pain less than 2 months after finishing a new degree to switch to a new field that is more accommodating for it. Bonus. I found the answer on a magnetic resonance imaging report from 4 years earlier that my doctor did not spot. Story 21. A few years ago, on a whim, I reached out to someone online because they posted something about Pokemon that I thought was interesting. Fast forward to now, we have been close friends for the past few years. I have grown close with their friends, and I have been making repeated trips to Europe to visit them all. A few have visited me as well. I feel so fortunate to have met them all and that they have been great to me. Story 22. I had bad teeth all my life and no habits for oral hygiene. Now I am 34 and a dentist for a while. To be honest, that was never my plan in life. Story 23. I have at least 2. I hated school all through high school and put in barely any effort, but fell in love with music to the point where I got scholarships. In junior year of high school, I made it into a 6-week intensive summer gifted program in music. While there, I had to choose a minor other than music, and out of perversity, I chose math because I couldn't imagine how a random collection of people of all different skill levels could be taught math. What would classes be like? I was in on-level math classes in high school because back in 4th grade I loathed long division and decided I'd never do homework and would scrape by on test scores. I was told I was bad at math, so who cares? I knew how to use a calculator. Well, this math minor blew my mind. I loved it. I loved the people there too. These were my people. So much so that I abandoned my scholarship options and applied to Georgia Institute of Technology based on my SAT scores. It was a simpler time. I got in. I loved the people I met at Georgia Institute of Technology too. I was prepared to be a lifelong misanthrope based on the people I knew in high school, but I'd never met proper, glorious nerds before that summer program, and here was a whole university of them. Thank God for that summer program. Thank God for my sardonic sense of humor allowing me to pick the math minor. Thank God arithmetic skills and math skills don't necessarily overlap. I ended up in a career I loved, in a roundabout fashion. The other plot twist. I was excited to meet fellow nerds at university, so I was happy to go on dates when asked. I casually went out with several of my classmates. These were largely the alpha males who graduated from high school to college, and I was immediately repelled by their self-important attitudes. I told a friend I was going to entirely give up dating for a year at least, if not forever. 2 weeks later, I met the man I'd marry, and we're still together 35 years on. I never would have imagined him to be my type, but he's probably the only type I could end up with. I was lucky enough to get a top-quality version of the type, which turns out to be a socially awkward uber nerd with a heart of gold. Story 24. Turns out we were my great-grandfather's second family. He was once a wealthy stockbroker in Seattle who one day took off, abandoning his wife and 2 daughters, and headed south to become a poor farmer. We learned the truth because of an ancestry test. Funnily enough, before finding all this out, my brother's girlfriend took one and was talking about everything going on with her family. I distinctly remember saying, "There probably won't be anything interesting in my family tree if I take one." Story 25. Spent my life daydreaming constantly and suffered memory loss. Got diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder, which involves multiple personalities. Story 26. When I became close friends with my ex's former partner, it was actually very funny. We both knew what kind of person he was, but we never discussed that topic. We avoided it. Story 27. Growing up, I never learned how to make food. If it wasn't throw it in the microwave or put it in the oven with no preparation, I couldn't make it. Thus, one of the top qualities I looked for in a significant other was someone who could cook. Fast forward to now, I cook all kinds of food and get yelled at for buying too many cooking gadgets. I use them all regularly. Story 28. My brother and I had a best friend with whom we did everything. He was basically like another brother to us. He ended up having an affair with my girlfriend at the time and bragged to me about it without telling me it was my girlfriend. They both lied about it and were involved for 6 months until her best friend finally had enough and told me. My friend and I are not very close anymore, but he and my brother still are. Story 29. My mom has always supported our family as the breadwinner, but my unsupportive father still chose to cheat on her. It had a significant impact on our family, including myself. Story 30. Thought I was a lesbian for most of my life. Came out to my family as gay. Turned 30 and started liking men. Story 31. I went from being a nice, ultra-shy, nerdy kid who tried his best to fit in, to a try-hard athletic nerd in high school, to a weed burnout alcoholic in college, to a depressed person with no goal in life, to someone who failed multiple suicide attempts, to a professional beekeeper, to being depressed again because of COVID-19, and now to a jaded and sober corporate financial analyst trying to make up for my past life choices. All at the ripe age of recently turned 28. I still have a lot to figure out. Story 32. Being lied to, cheated on, hit, and abused mentally, emotionally, and physically by a man I planned on growing with and having our child together. Story 33. When I was young, I hoped to have a wife and children. I thought everything would work out for me. It did not. I was constantly rejected for being myself. I am an introvert with no friends. Story 34. I had my 2 daughters when I was young, so by my late 30s I was done raising them at home. They both moved out and I thought now it's my time. My husband and I are still young and can enjoy this time together. Just us. Fast forward a couple of years, and I am now a mother of an almost 2-year-old toddler. Surprise, said the universe, you're not done yet. Story 35. I was going to say that not finishing college was disappointing when I had such high expectations, but after reading these comments, I will quietly leave and hope to God that being a dropout is, in fact, the biggest plot twist of my life. Story 36. 5 years ago, I thought everything would be more exciting after I resigned and started something new. Now I am just here, browsing on Reddit. My life is much better, but I still feel lost. Story 37. I found out at the age of 29 that my father is not my biological father. All my siblings are actually half-siblings, and my grandmother, with whom I am close, is not a blood relative. Everyone in my family knew except for me, and they never planned to tell me until my mother accidentally mentioned it. Story 38. I break out of a lifelong depression and find happiness after leaving home during the 2008 crisis of extreme unemployment. I lose about 100 pounds while walking the dog all over the city. I truly have hope for the first time in my life rather than simply going through the motions. Plot twist. My mother has a severe stroke, no money, and my life becomes working full-time and providing 24/7 elderly care or waiting for her to die on the street. Story 39. After working hard to find a job, I secured one, and 2 days later, my country declared one of the largest economic emergencies, which will increase prices by 20%. Story 40. I was the quiet kid who was absolutely obsessed with the military when I was a teenager. I joined and hated it so much that I had to pretend to be suicidal to get out. I later created a forum called Regret Joining and eventually immigrated to Canada, where I currently live as a Canadian citizen. All of this started from negative feelings about the United States due to an awful military experience. Story 41. Injured from doing my job too well, I was off work for a bit. I applied to a master's program abroad because I have always wanted to travel and was accepted. Now I am living where I can do what I love in a field I care about, have amazing healthcare especially compared to the United States, can travel frequently, and have met some amazing people. Story 42. Wrote a whole entry for this, but I think it's too long to comment. So the short version is this. Ex-best friend from middle and high school, who was expected by everyone to be successful and travel the world after graduation, ended up assaulting his own sister and only served 3 years. Story 43. Parents split up before I was 1 year old. I was raised by my grandparents until I was 8. Then they died. I was raised by an aunt and uncle, but they died before I was 10. Another aunt ignored me until I was old enough to join the military and leave. When my aunt died, I ended up with a lot of paperwork. It turned out my grandparents were actually my great-grandparents. They had adopted my mother, their grandchild, when their daughter became pregnant out of wedlock. This is why the family left the Roman Catholic Church. My mother cheated on my father, which led to my arrival and his departure. I did not know this for quite some time and thought he had abandoned us and taken my sister. My mother then decided to disappear, abandoning me with my great-grandparents. In summary, I found out I am essentially an orphan, my guardians were all shifted by one generation, and I was lied to about my parentage. Story 44. I was very comfortable in a house that was not mine. The owner died and I became homeless. Instead of it being the downfall I thought it was, I started making unusual decisions that began to pay off. Instead of worrying about right or wrong, I occupied a house without permission and made enough money to buy a car. I lied on the job application about being homeless by using the address of the house I was staying in. It worked and I got hired, but the pay was so low that I qualified for assistance. However, I do not take it because I am trying to earn enough income to eventually gamble and make moves to buy land for my son to use commercially. In short, I decided that instead of being homeless and trying to escape it, I would get out of the landlord-tenant game. My goal is to profit enough to transition to other forms of income. Story 45. Broke my penis at 18. Now at 31. I can definitively conclude this event completely veered my life toward a path of immense pain, depression, loneliness, and ultimately self-destruction. Story 46. The day I started my period in middle school, my mom picked me up from school and told me that my dad was not my biological father. My biological father died of a drug overdose, and our close family friend was actually my real uncle. Story 47. Realized after 6 years that I am in fact not a lesbian. I came out when I was 14. I am turning 21 soon, and I do not know how to even talk to men. I know for a fact I am attracted to women, but now I also know I am attracted to men. Story 48. Married a Muslim man, went the extra mile with the religion, never good enough. His father died, and his mother started bullying me about the life she wanted with grandchildren. My husband wanted to be cuckolded, tried it once, then said no. I went on a long holiday alone. He had an argument with my sister while I was on the phone listening about my television. I realized the television was more important to him than I was. I told him we were done. He vanished from my life without a backward glance. A woman in the city center told me there was a man waiting for me and gave me a sprig of heather. Took 4 years, but I met him. I gave her 70 pounds at the time because I was in a great mood. The next time I saw her, I ran like my life depended on it. Setting that aside, my boyfriend met me in the most effortless way, without even having to look for him because he had been watching me for 5 months. So she gets credit for long-term predictions. She said, "If you tell people about me, it won't happen." So naturally, I talked about her like crazy. Nothing will keep me silent, not even a true love prediction. Story 49. Brain tumor at age 23. I had headaches since childhood and never thought there was an actual reason behind them. Story 50. Married the girl from whom I fled my whole adult life. Turns out she is not just the love of my life but also my soulmate. Story 51. I never went on a date until I was 23 years old. I found someone I got along well with. I was married and had a child by the age of 30. Things were looking pretty bleak at 23, and then there was a plot twist. Story 52. Moved 400 kilometers away to study at university, only to give it up and switch to an apprenticeship. Made the decision to switch away from university and pursue a new career path in 2 weeks. Now I am almost finished with my apprenticeship. The most spontaneous decision in my career path turns out to be the best one overall. Story 53. I was raised in a very conservative Christian household. I was a perfect housewife in training, earned straight A's, cooked, cleaned, never contradicted men, idolized my dad, loved church history, and knew every hymn. Now, my siblings and I are all queer, and I am a witch. Story 54. Not really a plot twist. During my teenage years, my primary friends and I were just complete failures, skipping school, alcohol, drugs. None of us graduated high school. We continued like that into our early 20s. One day, I decided to move away. I got my general educational development certificate, went to a technical school, did internships, and worked multiple jobs both in and out of my field to become debt-free. After about 5 years, I moved back due to a job opportunity. I now work a very nice job and make good money. We have no debts and actually have a name in the community because of our philanthropy and volunteer work. I still have contact with those old friends through social media. I ran into one at an outdoor event. He called me a rich white person of European descent. He is Native American. We'd been close for over a decade, but my success was his tipping point, I guess. Sorry, I didn't stay an alcoholic, bud. Story 55. Probably marrying a woman who did not know that she was a lesbian, and around the same time that she realized that I was just realizing that not being like other guys sometimes means something more radical than does not spend every free moment watching sports and also likes trashy romantic comedies. Story 56. Anxiety medication. It turns out that actually seeking help has more of an effect on your life than going for decades, kind of knowing you should probably see a therapist someday. Story 57. I started off thinking I would just be another pretty face online. Plot twist. Now I am a whole person with fans, secrets, and a digital double life. Story 58. Joined the military for 3 years to learn a language. I met a girl. I now have a wife and 3 children. I never thought I would be a parent. Story 59. I discovered alien contact by placing an aluminum can, a thin metal, onto my computer trackpad. Now I am trying to convince people that this is real. Story 60. I got married, then shortly after, I met someone and fell in love with her. My wife and I broke up within 4 months, and I moved in with the woman I fell in love with. The 11th of this month will mark us being together for 23 years. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.